Okay, this is the one that I have been waiting to try. I think so far in dry January, I've gone through, I think I can count at least 12, maybe 15 non-alcoholic beers. And of all of them, the ones that really I enjoy were the Tool and the Lervig beers. But of all the ones that I've really wanted to get my hands on, this has been number one. It's Kinnegar. Kinnegar Brewing in Donegal up next. And then, welcome back to Views and Brews. I'm Brendan, and this is non-alcoholic beer brewed at one of the best breweries in Ireland. It's Kinnegar. They're farmhouse beers. They're from Donegal. They don't make bad beer. They just don't make bad beer. Like, there's not one single beer that I've ever had from Kinnegar Brewing that's been bad. And I don't know if I can say that confidently about every single other brewery out there. But this brewery, I can absolutely hand on heart, unless I've forgotten one. Maybe one slipped through the net. But anyway, let's have a look at this beer. They've got these cool label wraps around all of their beers now. A lot of them are to do with bunny rabbits. There's a lot of animals on the feature on there. And they've always got beaches and stuff, and they're just cool, really fun artwork label wraps. What does it say about this beer? Water, barley, hops, yeast. There's no wheat in it, which is interesting. A lot of these non-alcoholic beers, I'm finding there's wheat in it or there's oats in it to prop up the body of the beer and to keep the proteins high and the carbohydrates and all the polyphenols and all that. Let's just give it a bit of spiel at the back. At Kinnegar, we pair brewing tradition with a contemporary sense of adventure to produce clean, crisp, full-flavoured beers. The brewery is named after the beach beside its birthplace just north of Rathmullen in County Donegal on the islands at Wild Atlantic Way. Low Tide, which is the name of the beer, is our traditionally brewed 0.5% pale ale. So it's a pale ale created to make life with less alcohol enjoyable. Okay, even for beer lovers. So that's cool. So what I'm noticing about a lot of these non-alcoholic beers is there's the old style of non-alcoholic beers, which are there to serve the market, to keep them teetotalers happy. And then there's the new modern style, which is the craft beer style, and some of the old breweries which have stepped their game up as well. And that modern new section of craft brewing has said, no, we're not making crap beer just to serve a purpose. We're actually making great beer that tastes good. It just doesn't have the same alcohol level in it as your barrel-aged barley wines, whatever. And I think that's a kind of a cultural, mental mind shift that has to happen everywhere, because people just look at non-alcoholic beverages, and the first instinct that I usually come across is, I'm not drinking that pish, it's rubbish, But you open up a can of Lervig's No Worries or Tools Implosion or some of these beers, and I swear to God, they taste fantastic. And I'm a beer drinker. I don't drink non-alcoholic beer in general, but I'm liking the idea of thinking about the ABV of a beer in a different way. I like micro IPAs, session IPAs, 2.5, 2.8%. So I've got one over here from Brewmaster. That's coming up after Jan. That's 1.8%. It's that's the kind of things that I'm looking at now, and just saying, hey, what have these beers actually got to offer? So let's have a crack at this one. Let's open up the lid. The sales of these have gone through the roof. In England, I know that the sales have gone up 30% over the last year or two, which is huge if you consider the fact, like this one, I bought this one just after Christmas, but I tried to buy it after Christmas, a couple of days after, and it was sold out. So they bought 24, they'd sold 24, and now they had to get it back in again. That shows you there's a market out there for this kind of stuff, but only if people brew it really well. Brewing processes have changed. We're using different kinds of low alcohol yeast that can't eat the maltose and the maltotrois. Anyway, they can't produce alcohol, or they produce it in such small amounts. Instead of the old traditional way of heating the beer, so you're denaturing the alcohol, you're dealcoholizing it, or stripping away the alcohol, because what that does is it strips away all the flavor and the aromas. And the aromas on here are just fantastic. I just knew this was going to be good, but like already you can see that looks like a beer. Just try and wrap your head around the idea that you could be out with your mates drinking 5, 6, 7% beers. Like after 2 or 3 of them, it gives you certainly know you've had them. Like, why not throw one of these in the mix straight after, or a micro IPA like this one here? I'm not trying to upsell the idea. I'm just trying to say to myself, really, there's a stigma attached to drinking these non-alcoholic beers, and that just needs to be kicked into touch. That's BS. That's the old way of thinking. Anyway, cheers, Sláinte. I had a bit of a waffle, and people get annoyed if I talk too much, so I'm going to have a sip of this, and then we're going to talk about it. Missing nothing. Absolutely missing nothing. Right, so the first initial impression I get, the instinctive impression I get is there's a tiny bit of thinness to this beer, but only a tiny bit, and a lot of bitterness going on. Right, so now let's talk about the beer. So let's have a look. It's hazy, it's unfiltered, unpasteurized, decent head of foam on top, and beautiful zesty grapefruit, slightly piney, citrusy notes on the nose. Maybe a bit of yeah, a bit. I'd say this is in the tropical range, so there's definitely a lot of look at the head on that beer. There's nothing wrong with that. We're getting those tropical notes. We're getting a bit of pineapple. We might be getting a bit of passion fruit going on in there, and maybe a bit of orange in there as well. Let me give it one more whiff. It's just fantastic. It just on the nose, it just smells like a beer. I mean, I can see by the density of the bubbles that they're not as finely compact as something that holds alcohol in it, but the aroma's fantastic. It's so satiating. There's a bitterness that runs through this that's not harsh, and it has a finish to it, but it's really enjoyable, and it has there's a bitterness, like grapefruit bitterness going on in there, but it doesn't feel like it's missing anything. It doesn't feel like it's lacking in flavour. A touch thin. It's a touch thin, I will say that. But there's a nice sort of lightly, it's not bready, it's almost like biscuity character to it. Like mildly, it's a pale malt in there. There's some kind of biscuity note to it, and some kind of like crackery note to it. And it's enjoyable. There is malt flavors in there. Yeah, there's actually a nice bit of body going on in the beer. Like it is a little bit thin, and you do notice that it's on the thinner side, but only just a touch. It really has a really nice sort of pale malt or biscuity malt that's going on in there. Just props up that flavour and helps carry the hops through it. And it's actually really, really enjoyable. The hops in this are just fantastic. I mean, that's going to be my big takeaway from January, is that we're now brewing these beers, and where in the past you get all this sort of porridgey, worty tasting, malty, or kind of like honey, barley, mash sort of a beer. That sickly sort of taste that you get, the overly sweet sort of bready component to it. That's just not in these modern craft beers, these no and low alcohol craft beers. And that's just fantastic. And so I would strongly encourage you to put these non-alcoholic beers into your thinking. There's so many of them out there. I think I've counted about 30 already. Some are traditional beers, some are regional beers, and some are craft beers. Then, of course, you've got the big boys chiming in, and but this one, absolutely fantastic. Kinnegar don't make bad beer, and here's another one they've made, and it's also not a bad beer, and it's non-alcoholic. Cheers, Slancher, that'll do, and it's on to the next one. Bye.